So Luang Por, our first question for tonight is, Venerable Sir, in the Thai forest tradition, when using BTO Mantra as a meditation object, is the aim to focus the mind solely on the sound of the mantra in mind, or focus solely on the meaning of BTO, or it doesn't matter either way, as the aim is to focus the mind on just one thing so that the mind doesn't scatter? Sadhu.
Yeah, it's a good question. Mainly your aim is just to recite internally in your mind the word Buddha. And a bit like I was explaining with chanting just now, if you're reciting Buddha, when you're mindful, you're with that recitation. So there's an intention there to recite, to say the word Buddha in your mind. You may begin by saying it out loud, but as you continue with the meditation, that's probably too coarse, too distracting. So then you go inwards with this internal quiet recitation of the word Buddha. But anytime you lose mindfulness, well, you'll forget Buddha, and your mind will either just start thinking about other things or becoming asleep, falling asleep, or whatever. So the aim is to keep reciting Buddha as you're sitting there, or if you're walking back and forth, to recite Buddha with the walking. And if you practice it a lot, you're getting used to focusing your awareness on Buddha, keeping Buddha in mind. Then you can do it at other times when you're doing other tasks, other activities, waking up, falling asleep, and so on. You can recite Buddha at any time. And the idea is, by placing your attention on Buddha and reciting Buddha, you're not thinking about other things. So you develop this inner knowing awareness that comes with the recitation of Buddha. And it will reach a point where Buddha and the mind merge. So you're just reciting Buddha, 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 Buddha over and over again in a very relaxed, peaceful way. It's not forced and it's not stressful. And you reach a point where all the mental energy gathers together, unifies in samadhi, what we call upacara samadhi, access concentration, where there's still a little bit of movement in the mind. A thought can arise, a sensation can be felt in the body, a sound can be heard, but the mind is peaceful. So it's like there's a little bit of movement, but it's within boundaries. There's a boundary set, so you don't get caught into endless distraction and thinking and worrying. It's just thoughts can still arise, but you're reciting Buddha and you're with this quality of knowing from moment to moment to moment. But as it refines, you drop the word Buddha even. You can just be with the mind itself and the quality of knowing. And you can have silence in your mind. You don't need to recite Buddha because mindfulness is established and the factors of samadhi have come up, the one-pointedness, the unification of the mind, the piti, the rapture, the sukha, the happiness is there. And the mind goes silent and still. If that happens, well, maybe you might take up a further object such as the breath. So you've dropped Buddha, you're just with the knowing, the mind that knows. And you may now turn to focus on the sensation of the in and out breath until even that disappears. And then you're just focusing on the mind itself, but without distracting thoughts. So it's a progressive practice, reciting Buddha over and over again. But the aim is to develop strong mindfulness with Buddha to the point where you no longer need Buddha as an object. And you're just with the knowing, the quality of knowing, mindfulness. And you can keep that in all postures also. One of the reasons people use Buddha is because it does have good meaning. So yes, it will help you to recollect the Buddha, the qualities of the Buddha. So some people find that very helpful because they have great faith. When they recollect the Buddha, the faith arises, which gives them energy. They have a commitment. They really want to use Buddha because they have faith in the Buddha. They respect the Buddha. So if that's the case for you, it has very good meaning for you, then Buddha may be a useful object. Other people who maybe have not been brought up in a Buddhist background, don't know Pali, don't know the Buddha or the qualities of the Buddha very well, it may not be the right object for them. So you have to experiment here and see what works for you.
Sadhu Luang Por. Next, we have a raised hand. So I will ask him to unmute. Okay,
Hello.
you may ask your question.
Hello, Lumpur Kalyano, Eileen here.
Hello,
Thank
how are you?
Good, thank you. I was so struck by celestial chanting because actually over almost 10 years ago, we were at Brothers Bungalow in Penang. I remember Lumpur Pasano was there and they had done a lot of chanting to clear the air up there. And actually, after a 7 days retreat, where we had done a lot of chanting, when everybody had left, just a handful of us, I remember Baksun and Suhun were there, we could hear this chanting that was going on. It was so quiet. And we were wondering whether there was anybody else left. We couldn't find anybody else. It was only us. So I just wanted to share that now there's a name to it because we didn't know what that was. So thank you for that.
Yes.
I've never heard it since.
Well, it's, as I said, it's something that's quite common in chedis and stupas, meditation halls, or a place where people have done a lot of chanting and meditation, like where people have held a meditation retreat. This is very common. And all over the world, it's not tied down to just one country. People hear celestial chanting in India or Australia or Thailand or Malaysia. You know, it's not bound by time and place either, because many of the devas, celestial devas, are not bound by time and place. Some are very closely connected to a physical location, a place, but some are not. And so what you've just described, you know, other people have described similar experiences. Sometimes it's just when their mind is peaceful in samadhi and they have that kind of, you might call it a nimitta, a sound audio nimitta perhaps. Sometimes it's a smell, sometimes it's visual. But it's not always even when they're on a retreat or doing a lot of meditation. It may be just when they're chanting, or faith, even just when faith arises. So people can go to a chedi like Ajahn Chah's chedi where his relics are, and they're bowing and they're sitting there just kind of absorbing the peaceful atmosphere, and they're in a very wholesome state. And they can hear chanting. It can happen. So, you know, there's a number of different things that can stimulate this kind of hearing the celestial chanting. But it's a sign the one hearing it, their mind is in a wholesome state. They have faith. They have at least some level of peace and calm. And it's maybe also coming from the devas themselves, stimulating and inspiring. They want to inspire people as well. So perhaps they have a role to play in helping people to hear the celestial chanting as well. There can be a two-way thing, partly from the human, partly from the deva.
Well, they were definitely chanting the Itipiso. That was what was so incredible. And we were all, there were about maybe 4 or 5 of us, and we were all silent just to say, did we really hear that? We all did, yeah.
Well, it's
Thank
good.
you, Sadhu.
It's good to question these things, not just to immediately assume, oh, this must be a deva. It's good to just pause and say, what was that? And maybe confer. If someone else has heard it, well, that's probably a good sign it is what we call celestial chanting. Same with visual images and the fragrant smells of incense or flowers, same sort of thing. If 1 or 2 different people have the experience, then you can confer. That may help a bit for to help allay any doubts. But it is good to just check rather than rush to believe something.
Sadhu. Thank you, Lumpur.
Thank you for your question. Our next question goes, Dear Ajahn, when trying to find the just right amount of sleep or food, what outcome are we actually looking for? Is it what gives us the best meditation? Thank you.
Yeah, it's a colloquial term that's easy to understand because sometimes people find the technical Pali terms about samadhi, insight, and the practice, they're a bit unfamiliar with them, so they're not sure what they mean. But the term just right or Pati in Thai, it's a term people use with very ordinary experiences like food or, you say, have you got enough? You say, yeah, I've got just the right amount here, just enough. So it could be food or drink or some other material thing, some other experience, but it's a very easily understood term. And then you're translating that into your mental experience when you're meditating. So it's a feeling that everything is just right, it's just good. So it's an expression of peace. Because you'll notice when your mind is peaceful, it doesn't want anything else. It doesn't need anything else. So then you have a feeling of just rightness or it's enough, I've got enough. Whereas when we're not peaceful, there's something more that you need to be peaceful, isn't there? So the way of craving, the mind that is not peaceful is under the influence of craving of some sort. It's either you want something else to satisfy you, you haven't got enough, or you want to get rid of something you don't like, you want to get rid of that in order to feel peaceful. But when you feel just right or it's just enough, it means everything is falling into place. So it's a kind of catch-all phrase for a number of different qualities. So I was saying earlier, you've got the mindfulness, the patience, the effort and energy, and then you've got the rapture, the happiness, the contentment. If you want one particular quality that just rightness or just enoughness fits with, it's probably the feeling of contentment. Just like when you eat food and you've had enough, you don't no longer feel hungry. Well, when you feel content in your meditation, you don't need anything else. You feel content to be meditating, so you're not bored, you're not restless, you're not caught into suffering, because you've got to the point where you've let go of those feelings, those experiences. Of course, the feeling of just rightness will be temporary as well. It's impermanent, so you may have to work to maintain it, or if it starts to fade, where you have to go back to your recitation of Buddha or following the breath, you may have to work to regain it or bring it back. But generally, when you feel content, it's for a period of time, isn't it? So you feel content for a while. And one of the most useful things is it allows you then to maybe contemplate, develop some insight into things. Because you feel calm and content, then your mind can accept contemplating impermanence. So you can see thoughts coming and going, even painful feelings in the body, you can see them as impermanent when you're content. Your mind is content, is peaceful. You can see pain without getting caught up in it or reacting to it with aversion or agitation. So sometimes we can deal with unpleasant physical feelings because we feel content and see them as not self, as impermanent, as not self. Unpleasant memories that normally we don't like to reflect on or think about, maybe we can. Unpleasant emotional states, we can see them as constructions of the mind and things that we can let go of. The feeling of contentment allows you to contemplate and let go of many aspects of your mental experience. So it helps you to deal with suffering very well. And it's just a simple truth of life. If you're caught up in your suffering, you can't see suffering from a place of detachment, then you'll tend to be suffering when you're suffering. When you have a feeling of contentment, you can still come back to look at suffering, but you have the feeling of contentment. So then you can see suffering as it really is. And that can help you to loosen the attachment to the causes of suffering, the wanting, the attaching. So you need to be content or in a wholesome state in order to see suffering, or we say as a noble truth.
Sadhu Lung Po. Our next question goes, Dear Venerable, we are taught that our parents are our arahants. If we have toxic parents we've had to leave in order to preserve our mental and physical health, when they become old, dependent, how do we manage that situation? If we have the necessary outcome, can we ask institutions with different teams working and boundaries to protect them to take care of our parents? And what do we do when we cannot afford an institution to take care? Thank you, Ajahn.
Well, it's quite a profound question, this. Certainly, there's nothing wrong with your parents going into some aged care facility if that's what's needed. You do the best in the situation, where as far as financially, as far as people goes, maybe if you're an only child, maybe a burden, or you just can't do it to look after two elderly parents or two ill parents. Sometimes that's the case. Sometimes it's just beyond your physical means, your material, financial means. It depends on everyone's circumstances vary, don't they? But the reflection that our parents are our first arahants or brahmas is a reflection on the quality of love that they have for us as a baby, bringing us into the world and then bringing us up. It's the nearest comparison we've got in the human realm as to unconditional love. You don't ask for anything in return when you help a baby. You just give, you just support. Normally speaking, that's what human beings do. And even a toxic human being tends to still look after a baby. That's something to reflect on, isn't it? You may have grumpy parents because maybe they have a lot of suffering. They have suffering from their lives, physical suffering, a lot of bad memories, bad habits they build up. Okay, so now you're looking after grumpy arahants. Maybe there are grumpy arahants in the world. I mean, I used to look after Ajahn Chah, who didn't express much emotion, and so he was a pleasure to look after, but he certainly had a lot of pain and suffering. But I've also looked after some monks who were pretty gruff sometimes. So someone like Ajahn Mahabua, I helped to look after him sometimes, and he could be very gruff, just like a grumpy old granddad sometimes. But I had no thought of aversion. I understood when he was gruff, he was just teaching. And sometimes people teach with a gruff kind of tone, and they're very direct, very critical maybe of their students sometimes. So you can treat your parents like that. Okay, they have their gruffness, their angry, bad qualities, but you never forget what they've done for you. They brought you into the world. Your mum gave birth to you. Your dad who brought you up as well. That's the debt. That's the reality that you can never deny, escape from. And you don't need to escape from it. It's something to realize and recognize and appreciate. And when you bring up the reflection of what they've done and how special this relationship is with your parents, that helps you to deal with the toxicity of their character, their personality, if that's what they are. And one thing is to not judge them too harshly. I always suggest people, when you're dealing with parents, and sometimes they're a different generation with different ways of thinking and behaving, just pause and ask yourself, do I have these qualities? If you feel your mum is grumpy, your dad is grumpy, negative in some way, ask yourself, do I do that? Do I have that? Because quite often we are just as bad as them. It's just we haven't noticed. So come back and reflect on yourself, and that may help you to understand them better, bring up more compassion for them, put yourself in their place. Because how often do we get annoyed with them simply because they're getting weaker, forgetful, give in to their moods sometimes, their emotions sometimes, and we're younger, stronger, and we feel, oh, we're good and they're not. They're toxic, we're not. But we'll look more carefully. Quite often we are toxic as well in our own way. We have the same greed, anger, and delusion affecting us, and it will come out maybe just in different ways than our parents. So I would recommend don't be so quick to judge. And this reflection the Buddha gave us is to help us not fall into the trap of following our greed or our conceit, our ego, but to reflect more deeply on the gift of life that they gave us, the gift of Buddhism. Quite often parents who you might call toxic have taken us to Buddhism, brought us to Buddhism, or given us the chance to practice Buddhism, hear the teachings. You're going beyond the moods and the personality of your parents, and you're looking more deeply to the Dhamma, which is the truth. So whatever way you can bring up that reflection, it will help you to have a better relationship with your parents. And the better you can have that relationship with your parents, the better you'll have relationship with other people with you work with, people you live with, people you get involved with in your life. As far as how you look after them as they get older, it just depends on your circumstances, don't you? Maybe if you can, you stay with them and you care for them materially, physically, as well as mentally. But maybe you can't. It depends. If you have the means to do it, that's good. If you have to rely on the government aged care facility or the hospital or carers who you bring in, you just see what you can do. But you keep your same attitude of love, gratitude, appreciation for what they've done for you, and that will help lead your thinking, so you can see, what can I do in my situation to care for my parents, give something back to them. Whether you need the help of a government or private healthcare insurance or carers or other family members or people you pay, you just have to see what you can do within your situation, and everyone is different. Even monks who are penniless find ways to care for their parents. So my thinking is it's really a matter of attitude, having the right attitude and the sincerity, the interest to do the job, then do the best you can within your circumstances. So it's not even a matter of money sometimes, it's more about attitude and willingness. And just keep remembering the value and the goodness of your parents. However toxic they may seem, there's goodness in them. Don't forget that. Keep focusing on that more than the toxicity of them. Work on it. And that's part of the challenge of being a son, a daughter, bringing that reflection up and doing what you can for them. And of course, the Buddha said the best thing you can do for your parents is, one, practice for yourself, establish yourself in the precepts, in meditation, in right view, listening and understanding Dhamma, and then helping establish them in right view, getting them to hear the Dhamma, chant, meditate, keep the precepts, meet monks and teachers and nuns and teachers and so on. You do what you can for them as you do what you can for yourself.
Sadhu Luang Por. Next, we have another live question. You may ask your question.
Hello, anybody there?
Good evening, Venerable Luang Por. Can you hear me, Luang Por? Luang Por, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
I can attest Luang Por earlier advice, chanting calms the mind before meditation, and I do that. So normally when I go into meditation, after chanting, my mind is very settled, calm. But sometimes it's not completely calm, so I use BTO, in breath and then out breath. Is that correct, Luang Por?
You have to see what works. So tonight I was emphasizing chanting just as one, we say, UBbwa, or skillful means to develop mindfulness, to deal with distracted or worrisome, agitated states of mind. It's not the only skillful means. If you're developing a regular meditation object, such as the breath, or the recitation of Buddha, or contemplation of the body, and so on, that may be the main way that you deal with distracted states of mind. That may be the most important way you're training your mind. But chanting can be a useful additional practice. As I said, most of the enlightened beings I've had the privilege, the good fortune to meet or hear about, and that probably goes back to the time of the Buddha as well. I think they were chanting suttas, reciting suttas, paritas. Certainly Ajahn Chah and other teachers that I've lived with, they do quite a bit of chanting. So that tells you something, doesn't it? It says it's something that you may investigate. If you never chant, maybe try it. Or if you do chant, well, try and keep it up. Maybe learn more chants, learn them off by heart. I would say it's a very good practice to have at your disposal, to be ready for. And that means you have to learn a few chants off by heart, memorize them. But you also see what works for you. So some people don't do much chanting, and that's okay as well if you have something else. If you use the breath, fine, use the breath. If you've developed some vipassana techniques that work for you, fine, do them as well. You have to see what works. The number one priority in training the mind is to overcome the 5 hindrances. So whether you use the breath, chanting, or another technique, this is the challenge we face.
Thank you, Luang Por. Thank you.
Thanks for your question. Next question goes. Good evening, Luang Por. On a few occasions during chanting, unwholesome thoughts suddenly invaded my mind. Then a sense of hiri-ottappa arises. Needing some guidance from Luang Por on how to dispel such unwholesome thoughts. Sadhu.
Keep going. Sounds like you're doing exactly the right thing. Of course, whether you're meditating or chanting or listening to Dhamma discussion, unwholesome memories, unwholesome reactions can be triggered at any time. This is part of our accumulated karma, and you have to accept that. But you keep going. So if you're chanting and you do have a negative thought arise, you might have a thought of boredom or aversion, then that's fine, it comes up. But the whole point is to keep chanting, establishing mindfulness, seeing that mental state as impermanent, as unwholesome as it is, and let it go. So you may use the chanting to let it go, or focusing your mind on the Dhamma talk to let go, or focusing on your meditation object to let go. And almost certainly you will in the history of your personal Dhamma practice, if you practice over a matter of months and years, there'll be times when you're chanting and you will face unwholesome states of mind, either that have arisen prior to chanting and then you're chanting, and partly the reason for chanting is to overcome those states, or during the chanting you may begin chanting with faith and you're in a good state, and then as you're chanting, unwholesome states can arise. Your mind can be very stubborn, and the more peaceful you get, sometimes the more it throws up. It can be a memory of something that annoys you or upsets you. It can be a reaction to something in the moment. That, say you're chanting, it could be someone else is chanting too loudly or too softly or too fast or too slow or just in a different tone from you. If you live in a monastery, you'll experience this, because everyone chants differently. But when you come to chant as a group, you'll have an opinion form as you're chanting. And you say, oh, why is tonight's chanting going on so long? Or why aren't we doing more chanting? We should do more chanting. Or why does that guy chant so loud? It's right in my face, right in my ear. Or that guy is chanting out of tune. It happens, and you may be caught into a kind of reaction during chanting. It can happen. Just as it can happen when you're meditating or listening to a Dhamma talk. Some people listen to my Dhamma talks or any other Dhamma teacher, and when they're feeling peaceful and energetic, they say, oh, this is a great Dhamma talk, and they just want it to go on and on and on. Then another night, they're really tired or their legs hurt, and they say, I just want this talk to finish right now, but it's not. Anyone who lived with Ajahn Chah and Ajahn Chah's monasteries knows this phenomena. The Dhamma talk that goes on too long for you personally, someone else may be enjoying it, but you personally are going, I just want to end this talk now. I can't go on. I'm ready to sort of, just give up and throw in the towel and collapse. But it's just a thought, and you can't. If you're in and listening to a Dhamma talk, there's a teacher. Out of respect, you can't stop, you can't give up. So you have to put up with your own reactions, and you watch them arise, pass away. So by keeping going, by continuing, you may actually be able to develop a lot of strength of mind and then see these various unwholesome states arise and cease. It can be a stubbornness of mind reacting to a particular Buddha teaching. So it could be you're chanting the Metta Sutta and you're cultivating the thought of loving kindness, and then your mind throws up anger because you're remembering someone who annoys you. The whole point is that means you're getting down to the nitty-gritty of the practice. You're getting to your own attachments, your own defilements. So you have to be ready for that, to be patient, like you say, to have the hiriyottapa, the sense of shame, recognize a defilement, an unwholesome state of mind as an unwholesome state of mind, and then let it go. So don't be surprised if from time to time this happens, but try and treat it with the right kind of Dhamma, the patience, the hiriyottapa, the wisdom, the understanding, so you can get beyond those unwholesome states of mind.
Sadhu, sadhu. Another question. Dear Ajahn, thank you for your teachings. I have recently been struggling with obsessive thoughts regarding uncertain, unsure, false memories, which have me feeling very guilty and feeling like a terrible person. I have no intention to hurt any beings, and even the possibility of these kinds of thoughts brings about a lot of fear. I have tried to meditate, but it has been very difficult to focus. It has been a very difficult period in my life. How do I deal with these thoughts and feelings according to the Dhamma?
Right. Well, it sounds like you say you've been through a difficult time. You've got some unpleasant experiences in the past that are affecting you and coming up as memories, and maybe repeated experiences, habitual experiences keep coming up. So I would develop some strategies, what you're going to do when this happens. So you need to find something you can turn to that helps you to calm down in the first place. So an object or a reflection that helps you. There are some people, thinking of the Buddha. Some people, it's bringing up the thought of kindness, compassion for yourself and then for others. Some people use the breath. Some people use Dhamma reflections, reading or hearing them. I'm just giving you some examples here, but I would develop a strategy that when you're experiencing these memories and these emotions coming up, what are you going to do? And you have your strategy. What will you turn your mind to, whether it's an activity or a particular reflection? Obviously, sometimes you can also talk to people, good Dhamma friends, Kalyana Mitta, but that may not be a suitable solution every time. But from time to time, maybe talk to people also, and participate in things like this, talk about the Dhamma, listen to the Dhamma. But I would have a strategy. When I'm meditating, or just when I'm on my own and these kind of strong emotional reactions come up, or unpleasant, painful memories come up, like you say, they are actually uncertain. They arise, they pass away, and you can use that to your advantage. Sure, life is uncertain, and that can unsettle us because we don't know what's coming, we don't know what the future holds. So you have to try and bring yourself to accept the uncertainty of the future. You don't know, but so far you've come this far in your life, you can say, well, I'm here now in the present moment. I've come this far, I've had help, I've got many good things in my life. Appreciating the good things you currently have can help you deal with the uncertainty of the future. Or if it's memories of the past, unpleasantness of the past, well, remind yourself it's just a memory. Every time that memory comes up, just say, this is just a memory. It's no longer happening. It's something that happened, last week, last year, 10 years ago. Just a memory. Memories are uncertain. They come up, they go away, and over time, memories change. So maybe the very original stimulus or trigger for that memory has now, it's so far away, you can no longer accurately remember what happened. So you have to be careful, because often we're remembering things, like you say, in a false way, just remembering some aspect of an experience that you didn't like, when there may be many other good things that you could remember. So that's another strategy. You say, oh, when these unpleasant memories come up, I can turn my mind to remember some of the good things in myself, in my life, the people around me, the good in them, and the good things in this world, which there are. The goodness of the Buddha, the Dhamma, the Sangha. I would think it through when you're ready and develop a few plans, strategies, so that when in the future these experiences come up, you know what to turn to help you, what reflections, what meditations, what contemplations you can turn to at that time to help you.
Sadhu Luang Por. Our next question goes, Dear Luang Por, what is the difference between Chto Vimutti, Panya Vimutti, and Bhagava Vimutto, or liberation in both ways?
Well, the common thing is the word vimutti, which means, like you say, liberation, freedom from the asava kilesas, so the taints, the defilements of mind. So this is the arahant, the mind of the arahant. So it's the Buddha pointed out there are slight variations in temperament and karma of each individual practitioner. So some people tend towards Jeta Vimutti. Their samadhi is their maybe dominant or leading quality. They've developed a lot of skill with samadhi over previous lifetimes. They've attained jhana. They may even have psychic ability, and that's the lead into their practice. Some people are more, they develop the way of insight, panya, insight, wisdom, over many lifetimes. That's their character. They incline more towards that. So, the classic is Venerable Mahamoggallana and Venerable Sariputta in the time of the Buddha. Venerable Sariputta is considered the leading disciple in wisdom, the quality of wisdom of the Buddha. So he took twice as long to become enlightened as Venerable Mahamoggallana, whose leading quality was samadhi and psychic powers. Why did he take twice as long? Because he loved to contemplate the ins and outs, the different angles, the characteristics of impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, not self, of this five khandhas, the body and the mind, and all the aspects of mental experience. He was contemplating thoroughly, in and out, all around, so it takes longer. The one who develops Jeta Vimutti, they develop strong samadhi quicker, firmness of mind more quickly, so their mind packs a punch. So when they contemplate the characteristics of insight, anicca, dukkha, anatta, impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, not self, which they do the same as one who's developed Panya Vimutti, their contemplation, because it packs a punch, their mind is very pure, their mindfulness is very strong, very clear. It maybe takes less time to see the impermanent nature of phenomena, the lack of self in phenomena. So the one who develops Panya Vimutti may have less samadhi in the short term for their practice, but they have enough samadhi, but maybe not developing psychic powers, maybe, it all depends on the person. But they are contemplating a lot and seeing in all aspects of the five khandhas, the impermanent, unsatisfactory, and lack of self in the five khandhas. The one with deeper samadhi, their contemplation of the Four Noble Truths and the three characteristics doesn't take very long, because they see very clearly. It's like, The one with Chto Vimutti, they turn the light on and they see everything very quickly in the room. The one with Panya Vimutti, their light is a little bit dimmer, perhaps, because they got less samadhi, perhaps. So then they take a while to walk around the room, check everything in the room to see it as impermanent as not self. So it takes a little longer. But one thing to remember is they both attain Vimutti, they both have samadhi, they both have wisdom. It's not like, Moggallana didn't have wisdom, he did. Or Sariputta didn't have samadhi, he did. It's just they are coming from slightly different backgrounds. So in the end, Vimutti is the important thing, the liberation of mind from greed, anger, and delusion. But Chto is referring more to the purity of samadhi and the skill with samadhi. Panya is more the skill with insight and contemplation.
So did Lumpur explain liberation in both ways?
Yes, I did.
Sadhu. Next question. Dear Lumpur, thank you for explaining about the practice of mindfulness of the breath and using the mantra Buddha. Can you please elaborate on what the experience of knowing that you mentioned would feel like for us?
Well, what we're aiming for is knowing in an undefiled way, without hindrances, without distraction, just knowing from moment to moment to moment. And we all know when you're meditating, you're trying to develop mindfulness and knowing in the present moment. And what happens is you have mindfulness for a while and you start thinking, what we call mental proliferation. You start thinking about this and that, and you get lost in your moods and trains of thought. Sometimes you're falling asleep. But when the knowing is strong, mindfulness is strong, continuous effort is strong, clear comprehension is there. When these very skillful qualities are present from moment to moment to moment, this is what we call the knowing, the mind that has knowing or is knowing. There's a certain purity there. The hindrances are fading out, so you're not distracted. So then you can turn to contemplate experience from this place of just knowing experience rather than getting lost in it, caught up in it, attached to it. So you can know a thought, a good thought or a bad thought, a wholesome or an unwholesome thought as a thought, a feeling as a feeling, a mental state as a mental state, the body and physical experiences as a body, as physical experience. So it's in an unbiased, unstressed, unbiased, unagitated way. The mind is calm and clear to see the way things are more clearly. That's why there can be liberation, because you see a thought is not self, because it's just a mental state or a thought that arises, passes away. The whole point is when we don't have this quality of the knowing or mindfulness and wisdom, what do? We tend to attach with a sense of self. We identify, that's me, mine, myself. So we get lost in things, caught up in things. So we're constantly aiming to bring out more of this quality of the knowing, more and more in every posture, in all activities, as much as we can through the practice.
Sadhu. Next question goes, how to handle feelings of resentment towards a friend who betrayed me at work? Sadhu.
Or maybe you have to modify the word you call them by. If they were a friend, but now they betrayed you, they're probably not really a true friend. They're an acquaintance, a colleague, perhaps. Because our perception of people, well, that's partly formed by how they treat us and how our relationship goes. So, there's friends and there's friends. Obviously, you aim to be friendly with everyone. But as you work with people, you'll find that some people, in the end, you find you can't really trust them. Maybe they're working against you behind your back. Maybe they're very ambitious. They want your job, or they want to get on top of you or put you down as a way to make them seem better, and so they can get on in what they're doing. Maybe they're just a very untrained person, meaning they haven't been trained in sila, so they have no integrity. They, whatever you tell them, they'll pass on to others as gossip. Maybe they'll feel good by putting you down behind your back and so on. So over time, the Buddha said you get to know people over time. So working with someone over time, you get to know them, you realize, oh, this person I can't trust very much. Whatever I do, they're undermining me, or they're gossiping about me, backstabbing me. So you have to change the way you relate to them. You can still be friendly, but you're more careful. You don't tell them all your secrets. You don't rely on them. You don't expect them to be on your side or helpful in certain situations because they've displayed this characteristic that they can betray you. So your perception towards them and how you treat them has to change, has to modify. But you still practice with kindness and compassion, but you also have to be careful as you deal with them.
Sadhu Luang Por. Another question. Dear Luang Por, why are the commentaries looked up as being higher than the Buddha's teachings in this era?
Why exactly? The Buddha's words are the central teaching that we focus on. The commentaries are also very useful, but we can't always be sure who is writing this commentary, whether it's commentary from the time of the Buddha or just after, or what you might call the modern tradition. But one thing about the modern tradition is that we know them maybe personally. So someone like Ajahn Chah, why do I talk and other teachers talk about Ajahn Chah or other great teachers, Ajahn UBbwa and so on? Why do we talk about them? It's because we met them, we knew them. And that is an important thing, isn't it? If you know someone, you've lived with them, you may gain faith in them, in their wisdom, their understanding, because they answer questions, they give good guidance, good example. You get confidence from that. The commentaries can also contain many very useful teachings and can be very helpful. But you didn't live with those people who wrote them, the more ancient ones. You didn't live with those people. You can't be absolutely sure who they were, how they practiced, where they're coming from. Obviously, you can read their words and a lot of it will make sense, but maybe some of it still leaves room for doubt. So you have to keep a little bit of an open mind there, don't you? Even going back to the word of the Buddha, the suttas, as we know, some people believe some suttas were the word of the Buddha, some suttas were maybe written down afterwards by his disciples. In the end, all of the suttas have been recounted, recited, or written down after the Buddha, haven't they? Because the Buddha is no longer alive. So you always have to have just a little bit of open-mindedness towards even the word of the Buddha, just in case somebody remembered them wrongly, wrote them down wrongly, recited them wrongly. That's possible. But generally speaking, the word of the Buddha makes sense. They seem to fit together. They work when you come to practice the Dhamma, Sila, Samadhi, Panya, the Four Noble Truths, and the expansion on the Four Noble Truths, all the different themes that the Buddha elaborated on in his suttas. From what I can see, they make good sense. They're very useful as a reliable source for your practice. But sometimes the living teacher can have a special impact because they're living and they can maybe know you personally and where you're going wrong in your thinking or where your kilesas and your defilements come out. So I wouldn't dismiss living teachers and say, oh, I only follow the word of the Buddha, the suttas. It may actually be missing a very important input in your practice. But similarly, if a living teacher talks in a way or teaches in a way that doesn't fit with the suttas or the Vinaya from the Tripitaka, well, that may give rise to doubt, and it should, because ideally we're linking the two, the living teacher with what the Buddha said and what you read in the Tripitaka. So, like, say for example, Ajahn Chah, a living teacher, he's passed away now, but when he was alive, everything he seemed to teach, the more I've looked into it, investigated, it doesn't seem to go against what the Buddha said or taught, seems to fit with it. So then you get confidence. but obviously he didn't talk exactly the same as the Buddha. As far as commentarial tradition, writings from the Buddha after the time of the Buddha to the present, well, you have to just take them on face value, what's written down there, what we can read, and some may seem very good, some may seem slightly off, depends, in the end, one person doesn't have enough time to study and learn everything. You have to make some decisions as you practice, because one lifetime, if you're aiming for Nibbana, to realize Magga Phala Nibbana, the noble path, you can't spend all your time just reading and studying. You also have to practice. So sometimes you have to make a leap of faith and say, well, I have enough knowledge. I may go back later to study more, read more, but for now I have enough knowledge, I'm going to practice. Because the practice takes time, takes effort, and you need to put effort in there as well. But ideally you use both together, what we call pariyatti, the study, and the patipatti, the practice together. They support each other.
Sadhu Luang Por. We have one more question. It's quite a long one, so I'll read it carefully. Hi, Ajahn. I can relate to the person with the toxic parents. Fortunately, I don't really have to take care of my parents because they are financially independent, and my brother and his family of 2 adult children have always been living with them. Although my parents brought me up, my childhood was not fantastic as well, with lots of verbal and physical abuse, constant belittling by my father. I left home when I was 19 for further studies. Unlike other parents, my parents did not have to fund my tertiary education. They also did not have to look after me because since leaving home, I had been living with my husband until his death 5 years ago. I have been living alone since. My parents and brother still never saw the need to call me once in a while. I had always been the one who called home. One morning, 2 years after my husband's death, I called my dad crying that I feel unloved. No one cares if I'm dead or alive. My father retorted back, "You are the same." Although I felt the pain deep in my heart by his cruel and merciless words, I was not surprised by his reaction. I know him to be very conceited and revengeful. As a result of their desire to continue to punish me, I turned to the Dhamma. I now feel happy to finally find a way out of my dukkha. Unfortunately, I am not sure if I will ever have the courage to go back to see them. I am obviously missing something to feel this way. What do you advise, Ajahn? Many thanks.
Well, I'm very happy for you that you found the Dhamma and that it's helped you. That's the most important thing in the present moment. You can't change the past, so what's happened has happened. And it's very difficult to change other people, especially if they're older than us. So parents, we may not be able to change them or make any changes in the relationships and the way they are, but we can change ourselves. And you're doing that by practicing the Dhamma, and that's the important thing. But what you have to remember is, however bad it's been, however bad they've been, however bad it's been, if you harbor any grudge, anger, ill will towards your parents, even though you may feel it's justified because of the way they behaved, it's still a mental defilement that you have to address for yourself. And this is part of the change. You have to work on that to develop the kindness and compassion within yourself. And you don't have to let their words be the thing that determines whether you're a good or a bad person. It's more your own state of mind, your actions, your speech. That's the important thing. And they may recognize the good in you or not. That doesn't matter. in the end. You have to be confident. If you're practicing the Dhamma, what the Buddha taught, that is where your own peace of mind and happiness and success will come from. But what I suggest is when you become more confident in your Dhamma practice, and you should do, if you're practicing sincerely, it will definitely bring you more peace, understanding, and confidence. When you feel ready, go and see them. But you have to mentally prepare yourself. You're not going to argue with them, criticize them. You're going just to be a good child to your parents. All you need to do is go and see how they are. Do they need any help? And remember, help is not simply a material thing. They may be well off, and maybe that's part of the issue. They're well off, they're successful, so they're not seeing that they have anything wrong or any problems in their life, maybe. But help is also spiritual. So you may go to them and just visit them, see how they are, see if there's anything you can possibly do to promote their spiritual well-being. Get them to hear Dhamma, meet with the Dhamma. Maybe they won't, maybe it's too difficult, but at least try. So that may mean you go and visit them, talk to them, endure some of their negativity and criticism, but prepare yourself before you do that. So it's not a surprise. You go, oh, okay, yeah, Dad is doing Dad's thing, Mum doing Mum's thing. That's how they are. But you go with a heart of patience, kindness, compassion. And that's the test of your practice. So obviously you have to prepare yourself, get yourself ready for that. But I would recommend to go and see them when you're ready and just see how it goes, do the best you can. And so you're working, if they're on the material level, they're okay, they're well off, they're cared for, fine. See what you can do on the spiritual level. At the very least, do some metta meditation for them. You know, when you're on your own, you can develop metta meditation, think of your mum, your dad, your brothers, sisters, and do it regularly. Daily even is the best. That will then lead on to a visit, talking, listening, enduring, but start with the meditation on your own first and then work out from there. And it will lead on, it will nourish your relationship with them, your own Dhamma practice. It may give you the insight what you need to do next to improve the relations with them.
Sadhu Luang Por. Are there any further questions? It's just a follow-on comment from the last question. My dad believes he is enlightened. He said my knowledge in Dhamma is not right. This was our conversation a few months ago.
That's good. When people test our own faith and understanding, we have to go away and maybe there's some truth in what they say. You don't need to get angry or upset. It's quite common that somebody who looks down on us from a place of conceit will do that. They think they know the Dhamma better than us. They know everything better than us. But these people are teaching us. So see your parents as teachers, and these situations are a teaching to be taken, and see what it stirs up within your own heart, whether it makes you angry, upset, fed up, conceited, whatever. You have to work with your own defilements, and these situations may disturb your defilements. So work with it, practice with it. Don't worry so much about them, work with your own mind. That's your priority.
Okay, there are no more further questions, Luang Por.
Okay, well, nice talking to you tonight, and we'll end here by paying respects to the Buddha Dhamma Sangha.